So we are continuing on Daf Chet Amud Aleph. So we started a new parak talking about what you can use to make an eruv, what foods are valid, foods are invalid, and basically making the basics of how we started on talking about those details of the eruv itself. Right now we're actually in the middle of discussion of a slightly ancillary topic about whether or not about a question of what's considered to be right. So we said that one of the things was that in order for it to be good for food for an eruv, it has to have been a gidulei karka. It either has to it has to be something grown from the ground, or it has to be something that was or created from the ground, or it has to be something that's food. Right. So the question is, which one is it? And it's with the nafminas. So we spoke about. So yes. So the question was with regards to fish. Was one nafmina that was brought up yesterday. Now I can continue on with some other nafminas between the two of them. So Ela Amar Ravina Ofod Ibena. The difference between the two of them is birds. The Manda Amar Pri Mi Pri Gilei Karka. If you would say something that produces produce and is a thing grows from the ground. Haninami, Gidulei Karkanim. These two also are sustained from the ground or from the ground. Manda Amar Vlad Valdot Aretz. They want to say something that's born of the earth. Hani Ofot Min Harakat Nevru. But the thing is, though, the way that birds were created during migrations, they weren't created from the earth. They were created on the day before on the different day than the rest of the animals. They were actually created from the mud and not from the ground. The rakat. So man marabe ofot my time. Those who include flour, what's the reason? Man ofot my time. Oh wait, so what's the so really what's the reason? So because like that seems to be a little hard to say that like to just call birds a gudule karka or not is a little strange. Like what's going on here? So man marabe ofot. So whoever includes fowl, birds or fowl, kasavar klala batradaka. Means that the latter general rule is the main one to follow. Pratu klal, nasa klal, musaf ala prat, vitrabe lu komile. So we had a particular thing, and then we had a general rule. So that means that the main point is the right. Therefore, we get the detail from the big general rule. So they add together to give us the largest expansive view. This is why even birds are included. And then the reason why there's the clause, the first clause is simply stating that if it is too different, that it's not included. But in general, most things would be included. Right. So that's why it would be fine with the birds. But if you were to exclude birds, what would be your svara? So if you're going to be excluding birds, so how do you do this? So now we're going to do again in terms of klala prat. So kasavar klala kamada, but the first general rule is what's more important. The klal uprat, and when you have a generalization, then the details. Ve'in klal el mashma prat. Hani in miyad dekrin elo. Right, so that's what it says. So the general rule, yes, but what's not is not. In order for it to be similar, not just on two fronts, it has to be similar on three fronts. So, which makes even less things can be included. So Amar of Yehuda, Mishmei Derav Shmuel, Bar Shela, Mishmei Derav. Okay, so now we're going to talk about nor these can you or can't you use. So Ma'arvin, Bet Papuin, V'chal Dalalugot, V'gud Ganiyot, V'lo B'chaziz, V'lo B'chafniyot. So you can make an eruv with all of these things that grow on the ground, like all these things that might consider weeds. So which ones are allowed to? Cress, purslane, and sweet clover. Those are considered valid. But one may not do it with an eruv with green grain or unripe dates. So with good goniyot, be marvin. Since one could use good goniyot, that was the third one in the first list. That's the sweet clover. Didn't we teach that regarding eating sweet clover, those who have many children may eat it, those without children should eat it because it's actually detrimental to one's ability to produce. Bim hukshul zera, af nami af merube banim lo yelgelu. And if it was hardened already, the clover, then even those without children should eat it because it could lead to sterilization. So then why would we ever suggest to use such a thing for an Eruv? It's going to lead to such problems. So Targuma Ashalo Hukshul Zera Merube banim. Rather, so Rav would be referring to using it in the case of when it's not yet hardened, and then you already have many children, therefore not a problem with you eating it. Okay, leaving aside the medical part or the question for Revu, that's what it is. Or maybe it is those even without children. Because maybe it's, even though a person who doesn't have kids, but we say can have the two because of those who have many kids. So similarly, we had in the Mishnah about the case of having the making was truma, even though there's the Yisraelim involved. So maybe it's like that. So milot nam arvin lanazir b'yayin the Yisrael truma, right? So that's what we said, that you can make a erev for a nazir with one, even though he can't have it, or for Yisrael truma, even though Yisrael can't have it. So alma avagav the lo chazilahai. So it's fine as long as somebody can eat it. It is included in the grouping. Hachanami avagav lo chazilahai. It's here too, even though it's not fit for another person, it's fit for another person, and that's why it would be okay to use this. So the other option is because using the median clover, right, from Madai, like from Purim, Chel Paras Madai. So from that area is where he's referring to, and that is a lot less problematic, and that's why it would be okay. Because it's for some reason that one doesn't cause all these weird things. Because he is low. And wait, why can't you use green grain? V'ha'amar Rav Yehuda Amarav Kishut v'chaziz ma'arim mehen u'varachan alehem b'rei priyat tova. But didn't Rav Yehuda and the name of Rav state that daughter and green grain, you can make an erev with them, and you can say a bracha on them b'rei priyat tova. So if they're able to make brachas and be used, then why is there? Then why can't you use it? So lo kasha ha mekame data Rav Babel ha levatar ata Rav Babel. That's not a problem. The first statement he said green grain may not be used before he came to Babel, and then the second statement where he lied is when he came to Babel. So basically, he saw people were actually eating it, and then that's when he changed his mind. He initially thought nobody would ever eat this unripe grain, but then it turns out people do eat it, so therefore then it became usable again. Because the lesson for the brachot is whether or not you say a dama or shahakol on a food is, for instance, right, as in like a shakal we say on a food is necessarily a food. So here, let's say the question is, let's say changing status of, let's say, onions. So the Gemara talks about how onions used to be nobody eat them raw, so it will be shahakal eaten raw and it don't eat it cooked. Nowadays, there's room to say that since people eat onions raw all the time between salads and between eating salads or eating in general. So therefore, you might as well say that even nowadays you could make an adama on onions for exactly how we pass it nowadays. Please, before I forgot on that one, I'm not going to give you an answer on that. But the point being is that there are cases where the fact people eating it changes the bracha. So this is one of those cases. And similarly for the use in Eruv. So Uvavel Havya Ruba Dama. Wait, how could you change your stock based on Bavel? Bavel, majority of the world. Hatanya Hapul Vasa Orava Tiltan Shizra Anli Arak. Babla Data Etzkol Adam. If you decided to plant beans, barley, fenugreek, and in order to use it as animal fodder, like we don't say that excludes you from trumos and mastros or anything else. We say that because it's animal feed, it's human feed. We say no, it's human feed. So you can't, so you still have to get trumos and mastros and everything on it. You can't get away with that. So the figures are on chayav yarkan patur. Therefore, if you planted them, you're chayav, and if you had you could, therefore the part, see, all these things are also things that you only eat part of them, right? So you're only chayav to take Trumas Masra on the part that people normally eat. So let's say for beans and barley and fenugreek, so then like you basically are only eating the seed of them. But the rest of the greenery, we would normally be chayav for in Trumas Masra. So here, the same as normal, you'd be chayav on the seeds to do Trumas Masra from, but you would not be chayav on the greenery surrounding it. So again, this also would be the case for corn, barley, basically most grains, because most grains you only eat a very small piece of it, but you don't eat the tree or the plant itself. So actually applies to almost every single vegetation, because almost very few of them eat the whole thing, so except for I guess potatoes, we only eat, or carrots, we would kids, you have to eat the whole thing, you eat the whole thing. But for most vegetables, you don't eat the whole. It's basically only root vegetables. You eat the whole thing, but normally that wouldn't be the case. Therefore, it wouldn't even comment. You wouldn't. The rule is the same as typically, despite your best intentions of trying to get around it. So hashchachalayim l'had gargir shezera'an liyarak mitasrin yarak v'zera. So the case of the cress and the arugula, which are eaten together, mitasrin yarak v'zera, you would be maser both parts of it. The zara'an l'zera mitasrin zera v'yarak. So, and this is one where basically either way you have to end up doing maser on both, right? So there's shachalayim. So this is one where everybody always eats both. So even if you tried to only plant for one, right, it wouldn't change the din. Everything still remains exactly the same. Okay, so kikama Rav. So when Rav says that green grain can be used, what's he referring to? Which green grains of which fruits, of which foods, of which produce? So the deguninaita for the gardening variety, right? The garden variety. The normal ones people you would use for grain, those. But is it other ones? That will not be the case. So now we're going to try and figure out other ones. We're going to keep discussing different parts of the, more from the list and see what it's worth, what it's used for. So zara gargir, right? So arugula seeds, right? So now we're going to try and figure out what they're good for. Lakazi Amar B'Yochanan Shekain Rishonim Shelo Hayalahan Pilpalin. So, right, because normally didn't you normally only eat the arugula leaves, like in South, like so? What's going on all of a sudden? So the answer is that when people didn't have pepper, they used to crush up these seeds and dip the roasted meat in them. So if anybody would like to try that, please look at how it tastes. I haven't tried that, but apparently that's something you can do. Use it as a replacement for pepper if you're looking for a different seasoning for your meat. Okay, so Rizera, Kiava Kalish, Vigirsei, Hava Azil, Viate, Bapitcha, the Rav Yehuda, Bar Ami, Amar, Ki, Navki, Va'ayel, Rabbanan, Ekum, Mikame, Vakabal, Bahu, Agra. So, one time when Rabbi Zera was exhausted from his studies, he goes to the entrance to the yeshiva of Rav Yehuda, Bar Ami, and would say, when the sages go in and out, I shall stand up before them and receive the reward for honoring them, from the mitzvah of honoring the Talmidei Chacham, because he's actually too tired to properly learn. So he's like, I'll get this way I can stretch my legs and also film this at the same time. So Nafak Ata Yanuka de Beirav. So and then out popped a young boy who was studying. Then Amarle then asked him, "My Agmar Barabach." He asked. Then Rabbi Zera asked him, "What did your teacher teach you today?" Amarle Kashut Bore Priyatamah Chaziz Shakol Nevi Barab. He said that for daughter, right, the Kashut, you say Bore Priyatamah, and for green grain, you say Bore Nefasha. So Amarle Adarabba Ibukam Estabra. What do you mean? It should be the other way around. Hi Me'ara Kamarabe. Hi Me'avir Kamarabe. What are you talking about? Green grain derives nourishment from the ground, whereas that of the daughter derives from the air. So therefore, it should be shakal. So, right. So and halacha is according to the young school child. So why is that my time up? Hi, Gmar Perry. Hala, Gmar Perry. No, because what's the difference between the two? Daughter is fully ripened, but green grain is not fully ripened produce, and that's the difference between the brachot. Umayda kamar Chaim ar karabe, v'Chaim avir karabe lohi. And then when you say that one grows from the air and one grows from the ground, that's not correct differentiation. Kashud nami mi ar karabe. Daughter also has been referred from the ground. The kahazina de bekatlinan lailahizma umayti kashuta. Because we see that when you cut off the prickly shrub that is attached to the daughter also dies. That shows that the daughter is getting benefit from the ground, albeit all indirectly. So just a side note in terms of the, again, a scientific side note as to the where does things get benefit from. So technically, actually, all vegetation gets majority of their mass, not from the ground, but actually from the air. So every single, right from the carbon dioxide, as they turn the carbon dioxide back into oxygen, that's actually the majority of the mass comes from. Which is why you can start with, if you ever weight a pot, just you planted a seed in a pot, then you weight it for mass, and you realize that basically that it's roughly that the mass keeps increasing despite the fact that you didn't add any dirt into the pot, because actually most of the mass is added based on the carbon that comes from the air. But the point here is, as far as the segment of the nutrients to come, is it only from the air? Let's say like if moss grows on a rock, which has absolutely nothing to do with the ground, versus let's say these vegetation we're talking about, which actually are connected to the ground as well, because they at least get their water from there, or some degree of nutrients, even though the majority may technically scientifically be from the air too. Okay. All right. So the chaf note and arvin, right? And you're not allowed to make a. Are you really not allowed to make an eruv out of the chaf note, out of the unripened dates? Tanya, kor nikach b'kesef maser. Didn't we state that you can buy heart of palm with the money of maser? Yet it's not being matame tumat, meaning it's not really considered food, even though you can buy it because it's one of those in between foods. That's sometimes food, sometimes not a food. But kafniot, unripe dates, not only can you buy them with maser money, which means that they're food. They're also matame tumat ochlin. Meaning they can contract structural impurity for terms of tumah v'tahara. So that means that it's so cotton or even more so considered to be a food, because they also contract tumah ochlin. So that means that they're very much considered to be a problem then. So what are you saying? You can't use it for nature, like they're food. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer kor harayu ke'etz l'chol l'rab el shenikol b'kasem maaser. So the result of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion says that the heart of palm is like a tree for everything, except for the fact that you can buy it with just a maser, kafniot harehin k'pril chol devrim el shetrot min maaser. So you're right. So as in the heart of palm is like the tree, whereas the unripe dates are like one, except for one element, which is that they're true from maaser. So right, so each of them are essentially entirely like the other thing, but there's something wrong, but there's one thing off. So, right, so when are we saying okay, how do we solve the issue of Yehuda's opinion? Hatam benis chani. No, rather, right. So the difference is the case when do we say that they're no good? That we say they're no good for the unripened, for the kafniot, they're only no good if they're never going to have the ability to ripen. Right? They're unripened and never will ripen. Those dates are the ones that are problematic. But right, those are right. So those here. So you're right. So the ones that will never ripen are considered to be fruit, even as they are. Right? But Rav was talking about not. Was talking about ones. Sorry, the ones that are no good are the ones that will eventually become usable. Right? So if they're always going to be unripened, so then they're their final state, and then they're used as they're used. But if you're ones that are going to be later ripened, so for no people would normally not eat this, that's what creates the problem. So now Gemara asks, Ihachi, Bahalem Rabbi Yehuda P'tur min Maser. If that's the case, then why does Rabbi Yehuda say the P'tur from Maser if they're eventually going to become Chayav then? Bahatanya, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Lo Uzfru Page Beit Yoni, Elalian Maser Bilvad. So when it's talking about unripe figs of Beit Yoni, they're talking about only regard to Maser, as is stated. Page Beit Yoni, Vahini Tuvini, Chayim Maser, as stated elsewhere. The unripe figs of Beit Yoni and the unripe dates of Tuvina, one is obligated to give them to take master from them, even though they're seemingly patur. So Ella la'olam la b'niskani. Rather, let's recant. So what's the right to talk about? It's not talking about the case with the fruit that will never ripen. So it's not about that, but rather the machloket is based on shumat ochlan. Will this be mitame? This will become able to contract matame and pass that on or not? Did come Rabbi Yochanan ho'il v'ro'il l'matakin alidei or that he says what is the so why are they considered to be food? Since they are able to be sweetened by means of cooking them or by roasting them. So hachanami ho'il v'yachol l'matakan alidei or similar he too, since they can be sweetened through cooking with fire. Therefore, they are able to be tamet shumat ochlin, and so the issue being is that currently they're not food. So that's why you can't use them in their current state, because currently they're not ready yet. But the point is that they eventually will become food. So when they're in the interim state is the problem. But in the future, but let's say if you had to cook them, they would be able to use them. Similarly to let's say the case would have been like we mentioned with an onion, so it would be similar to that. That like the uncooked versus the cooked. Again, not accounting for the modern day reality, people starting to eat things that would normally be eaten, which also has fun camino. Another example of cooked versus uncooked, and see us changing in it is, let's say with sushi, where people used to consider raw fish to be muksa, let's say for shower purposes, and you'll be able to move it. But now people actually would eat it, so now it's actually allowed, which is kind of fun. But again, that is subject to machloket. So please consult with Rabbi Kropkin before deciding to start making sushi from scratch on Shabbos. Itmar Rabbi Yochanan, and that was Rabbi Yochanan states. Stated before, what's he refer? Which part did he mean? We learned what we learned from it, but when he originally stated, what did he mean then? So Hadatanya, Shkedim Hamarim, Ktanim Chayavim, Vigolim Kirim. So we're talking about bitter almonds. So the small ones are Chayav and Masrot, the large ones are not. So Matukim, Vigolim Chayavim, Ktanim, Pturim. So, but the sweet ones, big ones, are the ones that are Chayav and Masrot, small ones are not. Okay, so this seems to be because. Wait, which one? At which point are they edible? Right. So the large ones are chayav because they are the small ones. Of the bitter ones, the small ones are chayav because those are still edible. The large ones would be too bitter to eat, and therefore they're no longer considered to be edible. The sweet ones, so when they're fully grown, that's when they're edible. When they're smaller, they're not yet edible. Therefore they're patur. So Rishum Rabbi Yossi Omer Rishum Aviv. So both of them, Rabbi Shimon said in Rabbi Yossi, his father, that actually both of them you're patur for. Or you could say that they're both chayav. So Amar Rabbi Eli, Hor Rabbi Chanina b'tzipori divrei haomer zeh liftor. So then Rabbi, right? So here, so the question was in Rabbi Shimon, did he say that they're both patur or say they're both chayav for these bitter almonds? So and the Rabbi Eli says, "Hor b'cheina b'tzipori divrei omer zev patur." So Rabbi Eli says that Rabbi Chanina, and when he was in Tzipori, paskined that we follow the opinion that both these types of almonds are patur from Trumas Masra. So and now we're trying. Okay, so now we're going to try and figure out why it is or isn't. So Laman Damar Zevzet Luchiv L'Maichazi. So we understand why they're potter. If we say that they're not fit to eat, that's straightforward. But if you say that they are both chayiv, so how are you eating these things? So Rabbi Yochanan, we're talking on all day or. So Rabbi Yochanan has this is what we get for Rabbi Yochanan's original opinion of what they're allowed to be eat. The reason why they are chayav is because they have a way of being metaking them by roasting them, and therefore they are able to be chayav b'truas masra. So Amar Mar Rabbi Yehuda Omer Kor Harehu Ke'etz L'chol Darav El Shnikach B'Kasav Maaser. So we stated earlier that Master stated earlier, right in the Breita, that Rabbi Yehuda says that a heart of palm is like a tree for all things, except for the fact that you can buy with Maaser. Hanatanakama, but isn't that the same thing as the first opinion we quoted in that Breita? So Amar Abaye Shalako V'Tigno Yikabenayim. The difference between the two is whether one boiled or fried the hearts of palm. So while the big difference between Rabbi Yehuda, it would never be able to be Mekabel Tumah regardless. Because we say that the only thing that it could that's different about it is that it can be bothered with money of Maaser because it's sometimes food. Whereas Tanakama would state that no, that once you're metaking it, it could then be considered to be Mekabel Tumah Ochel. Makifle Rava. So Rava asked him, "Mi ika l'man Amar shall go take no lo." There really is somebody who says that once you boiled it, fried it, and cooked it, and made it, edible, that it's not chayav now in Trumas Masras. V'hatanya ha'or v'hashilya emi tamen tumad achlin. So didn't we state that? That if that animal hide that's been boiled or placenta. Are not makabel tumah, or sheshlako v'shilya shechli shevelem atamen tumad ochlin. But on the other hand, if you had normally we say that the hide of an animal and the placenta aren't food. But if you decided to start boiling them up and trying to eat them, or if you took placenta and when you took it, you decided it's for eating, then you would be chayiv tumad ochlin. Okay, sorry about that. I was just a little nauseated there by that. So Amaravas, what's the difference between the two? Ika benaya bracha. The difference between them is the blessing or recited before you eat it. Ditmar kor, it was said by the core by the heart of palm. Rav Yehuda Amar b'rei bread amash. All Amar shakani v'bara. Right. So that's the different. The real machloket is the question of what bracha do you say, not the question of usage for buying with Maaser, sheni money, or for the question of tumad ochlin, like once it's fully cooked. The main question is what bracha do you make? Because what's considered normally do with these items. So again, for the placenta, that's not relevant. We're talking about the case of the heart of palm. Rabbi Yehuda Amar Borei Priyadama Uchlo. So Rabbi Yehuda would say that you say Borei Priyadama because it is now food. Shmuel Amar Shekhalim Bevro Kivan Shesofel Hakshot. But Shmuel would say you say Shahakal on it because eventually it's going to become hard and inedible again. Lavavarkan Eloi Borei Priyadama. So since it'll eventually become inedible again, it's only edible for a moment. Therefore, you can't say Borei Priyadama and say you're saying Shahakal. So, Amarle Shmuel or Rav Yehuda. So the Shmuel asked Rav Yehuda, Shinana Kavatach Mustabra Hat Snow Shopal Akshot Var Kanale Bre Predama. So Shmuel said to Rav Yehuda, Shinana, right? So that's a term for the person teaching it. Your opinion is reasonable as a stone, which is a radish, will eventually harden, and you'll say the bracha of Borei Priyadama. Right. Also, stone is a very important vegetable to remember because it's also the example of a davar charif. So it comes with blood and chulin, and so it's a very important vegetable to recognize. Well, is this really so? Snow natai inashi adata de pugla. Zichron tayin shadata de kora. No, that's not right. Because people plant radishes to eat them, but people don't plant date palms in order to eat the heart of palm. Like that's not why they do. That's not how they plant palm trees. They plant them for their dates. So the Avagav that calls say Shmuel or Yehuda, he'll talk about data Shmuel, even though Shmuel praised Rav Yehuda. The halacha has to follow Shmuel. Kufa Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. Kishut v'chaziz ma'arvin bahen. So we stated earlier that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Rav that daughter and green grain you can make an Erev with. You can also say bracha break out of them. So kishut b'kama. So the question is, what is the quantity that you would need in order to do this? So kadamar Yechiel kumlo yad. Haname kumlo yad. So how much of it, if you're according to the opinion that says you're allowed to use daughter, how much you need to use to make an Erev? So Yechiel says with a handful. Here too, the measure is a handful. So Chaziz b'kama, and how much for the green grain? Amarav bar Tovia, bar Yitzchak Amarav kumlo uzilita ikra. So how much would be considered of green grain in order to be the amount to use for an Erev? Rather, it has to be a full farmer's bundle. So now we're continuing on with more examples of what you can or can't use for an Erev. So Amar Rav Filkia bar Tuvia. So and Rav Filkia bar Tuvia said, Ma'arvin b'kilia. One may make an Erev with glass wort. So b'kilia salatatech. So wait, do you really mean with glass wort? Ella biyarka de rather from the ashes. Ella biyarka de klaya. So no, not with the glass wort itself. People don't eat that. Rather, it's the herb from which the glass wort is normally burnt when it's prepared, and that's what it is. Kama amarfiel kmoyad. That's amount is a handful. So Rabbi Yirmiyah nafak l'kiryata. So Rabbi Yirmiyah wants to visit certain villages, and the villagers asked him, and that's can we make it an air with moist beans? Lo hava biyad. He didn't know. Kietlo Beit Midrash, and then he went to the Beit Midrash to ask. Amar Ulei, Hachi Amar Biyanai, Avim Pulin Lachin. So then he went to the Beit Midrash and asked, can you do air with this? And he said, yes. The comment, how much? Amar Vichiel, Kamoyad. You need a handful. Amar Hamnuna, Ma'arvim Mitradian, Chaim. One make an area with rabbis. He needs really so. Hamar Chista Silka, Chayakatil, Gabra Chaya. But is that really so? Didn't Chista say Rabbi kills a healthy person? No, the only one that's truly dangerous is the one that is partially cooked. So you can Amar Mamnuna, Ain Marvin Betraji and Chaim. You don't cook with the raw with raw beef. Make an air with raw beef. Another version of it was stating that according to Mamnuna, you can make an air with raw. You may not make a air with raw beef. As the Chitza said that that raw beef kill people. Kills a healthy person. So v'haka chazina and deka achla is v'lo ma'ati. But people eat it, they're not dead. So what are you talking about? Hatam v'vasha v'lo vasha. The ones you've seen people eat that aren't dying from is where it's partially cooked. Okay. Okay. So now we're going to do we have one more that's related to Trajan, and then we'll do a little chazara, and then I'll see if I can find some pictures, so then people can ask questions, and also if you want, I can try and find all the diagrams, the pictures of the vegetables. So Amar Chista Tavshil Shel Tradin Yafel Alev Tov Leinai. So Chista says actually that if you have cooked beets, it's good for the heart and it's good for the eyes. The Kol Shekain Bnei Me'ayin, and more so the case for the intestines. So Amar Ba'if Hu Diatev Abe Tafe Fave Tov Tov. And how do you know when it is good for the heart, the eyes, and for the intestines? So BAYT says that is when the dish that's on the stove makes a tuch tuch sound, right? That means it's when it's basically when the cooked beets are making a boiling sound in themselves, not just the water. That's when they're fully ready. So as for what exactly, again, so everybody's a big fan of beets. So ever, kids are saying that they don't want to eat their beets. So this is the Gemara you should quote them. Hopefully that'll make them more excited about it. So again, so today was a break, and we'll be doing for the first two prakim. For the first two prakim, it was mainly about how to fix a mavoy, or how to fix it possibly road, how to fix your access to water on Shabbos. And now all of a sudden we're getting into the details for what you're allowed to use for your Eruv. For as far as what we actually will end up using for our Eruv, so I'm going to so we'll leave out the local masa because there's still a lot of Gemara to talk about, where it talks about what you can and can't use in which cases. But again, just to sum up what from basically the beginning of the parak through now as to what we're doing, and then we'll as far as the question of what you're allowed to use. So the Mishnah initially said you're allowed to use anything you want as food, except for salt and water. And then the first again, yesterday's stuff was talking about, again, is that general rule considered to be a valid general rule, and to what extent. Then we started discussing, and then we had discussed which cases where general rules aren't good general rules, and why we don't use general rules, even when a general rule then has the word chutz, which you may have thought is a better general rule because it has what's excluding inside of it. We said again that's also no good. And then we went through a whole bunch of examples of that, and then we got to the Gemara today. We started talking about some of the nafka between the opinions when it says what actually is valid, whether it needs something that grows that's a gidulei karka, or it is something that is born from the earth. Again, they sound very similar when you're saying in English, but halakhically they're very different, right? One being the case of it's nourishment versus the way it was done in Maaseh Bereshit. And then we were talking about the more questions of how everybody got to their opinions, whether of generalizations versus limitations. And then we started getting to questions of what exactly these things are. So let me here it goes. So let's try and go through some of the less commonly known vegetables that I personally didn't know what they were. So let me try and again, I'll just come up on Google just so we get just so we have some idea of. And so you got everything Google with me, please. I'm going to share the screen. That way you can all see what I'm looking at. And hopefully enjoy, and just so that again, most of us don't happen to buy these. It's I've never seen them in the store. So we should know which of them are. So that is what sweet clover looks like. And then let's look for median clover. See if it's let's see what that would. Okay. I guess nobody knows what that is either. Okay, I guess that didn't come up. Sorry. Let's see what the other one that I thought was that I didn't know what it was. So beans, barley, fig, and Greek is planted. So then we should. But again, I could here. Let's just look at the whole plant as opposed to the seeds, because right. So again, you may have seen these used in certain cooking dishes. So this is what it looks like. Question: which part do you use when it's normally sold as an herb set, not necessarily for seeds, right? Because again, that's what the question was. People don't normally eat the seeds if they're Greek. So now let's look at the other things. Is that again, unless you're a very big, a lot of times you wouldn't necessarily even know what the food is and you've been eating it, right? So this is what cress is. Again, also something that you may find in a salad that you may not have known what it was called, but now we do. Arugula is a little more common. So, but again, that again looks more like a more normative salad thing that you may have seen. Again, that's the arugula. And what was the other one that I thought was? All right. So, I want to. If anybody's ever found the arugula seeds, please let me know if they sell them, because it might be worth trying to make meat with it. Just to test the Gemara as a question: does it really season the as well as pepper when you're roasting meat? And then the other question was, what was the other one was that I personally am not so familiar with is daughter. So we will look at daughter. So it doesn't look very good. It looks kind of like a weed, to be honest. As opposed to the rest we had before, this one looks the most like a weed. So, right. So that was the the question as to what its status was. Hearts of palm is the center of a palm tree. So let's see. Let me just see if I can see the heart of palm from palm tree. Let's see if we can get a good diagram that shows us what it's from. Oh, in wild. Okay, that'll get us a. There we go. That's a good. That's you see there. That's a palm tree. Right, you see the center of it. So that's where you can start getting the hearts of palm from the very middle part there. That's the heart of palm. Right? Everybody sees that. So typically they would use they normally wouldn't be cutting the main stalk down. Normally be more from the younger one because otherwise it'd be too hard. And then was there for unripe figs and unripe dates? So that, again, they look like normal ones. They're just green and smaller. And was there anything else? Bitter and sweet almonds, they look basically the same. Here, bitter almonds. Again, they look normal versus sweet almonds. Kind of like if anybody's ever heard the difference between sweet corn and unsweet corn, they also look almost identical. They're also basically the same exact thing. Just the question is, they look the same, but based on the gene, based on the type, of whether or not you want to eat them raw versus them be cooked or not. So, you ever tried eating unsweetened corn raw? It's quite terrible. But if you ever tried, say, having sweet corn raw, it's actually quite tasty. So let's see, is that all of the as far as it's known? So let's search that in Hebrew because maybe that'll get us not just the same boring radishes. It'll get us give us boring radishes. I'm hoping it would give us a different genus that was native to Bavel, but I guess, or Eretz Israel, but I guess radishes are pretty ubiquitous. So now, okay, so the last one I forgot was glasswort because that I had never heard of before. Glasswort. Okay, so this is one that I thought was. Everybody sees this one. This I don't think I've ever seen this before in my life, to be honest with you. Somebody has, please chime in and tell us where. But like I've never seen this sold in a store. So I guess this is one where we right, which would bring up the question of why you can use it or not. And here's one where it's like, yeah, probably not, because people tend not even to use it. So again, we're talking about the question of what foods are valid to be used for use of the Eruv, and we had some of the quantities, whether that being a handful or from bundles worth. As far as halakha l'maaseh goes, this will typically not in following any of this, because typically when we're doing an Eruv, we try to do it using bread, as we will get to for the reasons why later on. But again, it is good to know that also bear in mind that with the Gemara, a lot of times making an Eruv is actually quite difficult from the financial standpoint. So they would often use things that were not necessarily l'achila, to say just for your personal Eruv, as opposed to for a communal Eruv, where they're more makbid using grain and bread. So again, we'll get to, as they come up, we'll explain more about what each of the variations of the Eruv was and what you would use and why, and the benefits or the shortcomings of each method. For now, we're simply treating everything, saying we're talking about Eruv Chatzerot, and this is the group food. And as far as halakha l'maaseh goes, we'll hopefully have some better idea of that towards the end.
All right, thank you.
Oh yeah.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Also, by the way, if anybody has time today, there's an training day with the Midrash Zichron, where there'll be shiurim about the upcoming Chagei Tishrei, about Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkos and Simchas Torah. So if anybody's interested, welcome to tune in. That'll be from 10 to 1, as well as from 6 to 9 p.m. today. And yeah, so.
Have a good day, Rabbi. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
How you doing?
Thank God. So.